안녕하세요, 주호입니다. Today we'll look at a very common grammatical form which is difficult to interpret. It is of course Ninda. Many beginners will ask, what does this grammatical form mean? How do you translate Ninda? A better question to ask is, why do speakers use Ninda? Though this is one of the most important grammar points to know, it doesn't get a detailed explanation. Ninda is normally described as something which connects two clauses. It's normally translated as meaning though, but, while, however, so, when, and, a semicolon, and so on. How is it that this grammatical form can be translated in many different ways? The answer becomes clear when we see how and why it's used. So there are two kinds of Ninda. It's really just the one grammatical form, but we need to consider the two ways it's used. Looking at both will show what function Ninda has and why speakers use it. Firstly, there's Ninda as a clause connective feature, which is what most beginner resources explain it as. Here it looks like this, with clause A and clause B connected by Ninda. Clause A provides a background for what is to be delivered in clause B. Here we see why Ninda is described as linking two sentences, where sentences A and B can stand alone or be joined together into a single sentence with Ninda. The second way Ninda is used is as a sentence final or turn final feature. Scholars think Ninda began originally as a clause connective and over time gained its sentence final usage, which is now the more common of the two variants. Since speakers use it for many motivations, it's the more difficult of the two to interpret. For example, Chosu sees Youngie eating a cookie. 나도 좀 줘. 하나밖에 없는데? Here, Ninda marks the end of the speaker's turn and signals something to Chosu. We'll see what that is in a moment. So as a clause connective, it's mostly to do with setting background information. You see, when we communicate, we need to consider what the other person knows and doesn't know. Sometimes we need to set the background before we deliver a message for it to be understood. For example, 제주도에서 필요한 거 없냐? 에? 제주도 가? 제주도에 가는데 필요한 거 없냐? 아니, 괜찮아. The second conversation is much smoother because the speaker has provided a background for the question. Without the speaker giving an indication that they're going to Jeju, it can make the listener think, why are you asking me this? The clause connective Ninda works like this. The speaker provides background information to the listener, which they assume was not in the listener's consciousness at that moment. It enables the following speech to be more easily understood by setting a context. Some learners assume that Ninda is used to contrast clause A and clause B, especially when it's explained as meaning though or but in English. However, this isn't the case. As a clause connective, Ninda is used to simply mark a background setting. This setting may or may not be used as contrast. Looking at when Ninda ends a sentence or speaker turn is more difficult to interpret because speakers will use it for different motivations. It's the more interesting of the two ways Ninda is used, as it helps paint a clearer picture as to why speakers use this form. Similar to how the clause connective Ninda provides background information, sentence final Ninda sets a background, but the speaker doesn't deliver the second part of the message. For example, 이 드라마 완전 재밌다. 나 지금 공부하고 있는데. Here, Youngie is requesting something from Chosu. Rather than saying what she wants, she omits the second part of the sentence which would have the request in it, as in A, B, or both A and B. The important question is, why doesn't she use a full sentence to say what she wants? Why doesn't the speaker add on the second clause, which is the main part of the utterance? It's because the listener is able to infer what is left unsaid. That is what Youngie is prompting from Chosu in using Ninda. She wants him to reconstruct what is unsaid and to infer which action is appropriate. By omitting the request part of the sentence, speakers can make requests more polite. This is how Ninda, as a sentence final form, can make the utterance more indirect. There are many ways to make requests. You've probably seen examples using the following forms. However, in real life, Koreans tend to use Ninda to make requests more frequently than full sentences, as in 1 to 3. And this is a result of the non-direct, non-confronting nature of Ninda and the smoothness it gives to conversation flow. Note that Ninda itself isn't polite, but rather speakers use it as a politeness strategy, though this isn't always the case, and speakers do use it for sarcasm as well. Another example of using Ninda as a politeness strategy is, say, when receiving an inconvenient phone call. 야, 어디야? 빨리 와. 나 지금 산인데. Here, Youngie uses Ninda to signal to Chosu that his prior assumption that she could arrive straight away was incorrect and problematic. That is, she's denoting the background circumstances which were not, at that moment, in the listener's consciousness. Other examples of sentence final, turn final Ninda include dispreferred responses, such as when giving an unexpected reply. For example, Chosu phones Youngie's house wanting to speak to her. 영희 있습니까? 영희 시장 간 것 같은데. In this example, Youngie's mum politely informs Chosu that Youngie is not available. The use of Ninda makes the sentence seem less direct and signals that she's willing to help by either taking a message or getting Youngie to call him back. As with the previous example, Ninda acts as a conversational lubricant, as the sentence would sound abrupt without it. Moreover, Ninda can be used with questions, as in 대통령 반대 시위 갔니? 언젠데? Here, Youngie uses 언젠데 rather than 언제야. Why does she say this, and what's the difference? Youngie could be suggesting a few different things. She could be pointing out that she simply didn't know about the protest. She could be indicating that she did know and she wants to go if the time suits. Or she could even be pointing out that she was aware but has no interest in attending. Speaker tone and facial clues serve to clarify the meaning between the lines. Without knowing the context of the conversation and the relationship between them, we don't know. The important thing to realize is that the speaker uses Ninda in a suggestive manner for the listener to read more into the situation. Here we see that Ninda serves an important role in speaker interaction. One important point which hasn't been mentioned yet is that Ninda is more common in spoken than written form. This is indicative of why it's used. Ninda is related to the interactions between speaker and listener. It serves as a conversational lubricant and smooths cooperation between speakers. As a clause connector, Ninda functions to provide information based on what the speaker assumes to be missing from the listener's consciousness. As a turn final or sentence final feature, it signals to the listener to reconstruct whatever is missing and read between the lines. So when we look back to this example, without Ninda, it would seem that Youngie is saying, I only have one and can't share. But with Ninda, she signals one of the following. And this is my hot tip for studying grammar. Don't overanalyze the semantics or the meaning of what's said, but focus on the why it's said. I hope this lesson has been helpful.